Hey, let me share another update on my Silverado here with this OM606 motor to give you some details on changes I've done recently. This will very likely be the last update I post on it. The reason is that I made a decision I'm going to be selling the truck. There's not much more to do on the truck, at least in my opinion. And I guess I realized that I enjoy more working on these projects. And I run into this OM606 motor that I got for a pretty good deal. And I'm really tempted now to put it in a 1967 C10 that I have. Very likely. But the thing is that I keep my truck in my garage and I need to come up with a space to do the work. The main idea in the last video was to share that performance had improved from switching from mechanical pump to electronic pump. However, I come to find out that the mechanical pump I bought was supposed to be sent to me with an external ALDA, which was supposed to improve fuel delivery. The pump arrived without the ALDA, and I don't know if that was the issue, the reason that I was experiencing performance issues initially. Anyway, the idea in this video is to share details on having switched to this new turbo here. Is a HE221W, and also replacing the 4L60 transmission. I initially started with replacing it with the 722.6 that came with the motor. It's a 5-speed transmission. I'll also get a little bit into the placement of the motor that you see here, which I am pretty sure is final. I like the way it sits now. Okay, the turbo. Well, what I had before was a VNT type that wasn't a whole lot of fun to control. So I've been trying to get my hands on this one here, which is a wastegated type. For quite a long time, I finally got a good deal on it. It's, again, the HE221W. It's a 7 centimeter. It has a billet wheel. As you can see, for my intercooler piping, I had to clock the compressor housing. In doing so, the actuator ended up below the compressor. That's my bracket there to relocate the actuator. Not very fancy, but it works really good. The oil feed line that I had before worked on this turbo, so that didn't take a whole lot of work. And for the flange, I welded the flange directly to the manifold. Also increased the exhaust pipe size to 3 inches. And also when I went ahead and relocated the filter. In getting this turbo, I also replaced my intercooler. What I had before was a small one behind the bumper. I got a bigger one and I put it in front of the radiator. That's the 2.5 inch intercooler piping. There you can see the intercooler. And I also eliminated the EGR valve. So the reason for sharing details on this new turbo is because I'm very happy with it. I believe that I finally found the right one for my project. It spools very quick, and it makes at least 30 psi, which is more than enough for the 90 cc's or so max that I'm getting right now from the pump. I think the turbo is good for a little bit more. I think it's good for at least 110 cc's. It is a small turbo, but I think the right one for me for daily driving. It spools faster, in my opinion, than the KKK 1.4 that came on the motor. It also makes more boost, I think a little bit more boost, and it lets the motor breathe a little bit better. It puts a smile on my face finally. Yeah, by the way, one more disclaimer. Since I'm making the emphasis that performance improved with this new turbo, I have to point out I cannot really quantify how much of that benefit comes from the turbo itself and how much of that benefit or improvement comes from the bigger exhaust pipe and the bigger intercooler. The rust, by the way, I washed the motor. And also the actuator on the turbo is controlled by this solenoid and standalone ECU. The solenoid came from the same car, the donor of the motor. In the last video I showed having lowered and leveled the motor using an OM608 oil pan to clear the rack and pinion that was sort of in the way. Well, ever since I redid my mounts, I came up with new mounts so I'm gonna go under the truck to try to show them. And a couple other things down there. Another quick note I want to make regarding mounts and position of the motor. Initially, the motor mounts, I was using the stock 606 motor mounts, which I had here, and I moved them over here. Let me show you a quick view of the mounts I fabricated. Here's a quick look at my motor mounts using Dodge mounts that were used, I believe, on a 4BT motor. You can also see my drain pipe over there and my actuator. Not a really good view, but there you have it. Yeah, since I'm here, let me also show you my rack and pinion and the clearance I now have between the oil pan. Like I said, the new OM608 oil pan that I got, and also the very tight clearance here with my rear cross member. I may as well show the transmission. My bracket there to flip the shift cable, and the transmission mount that coincides with the same location as the 4L60 here on the transmission mount. Quick look at where I welded the little tab for the shifter. There's what my new drive shaft looks like. Obviously in the back it has the tailpiece of the original Chevy drive shaft. Okay, now the transmission. The 4-speed Chevy and the standalone TCU I had before were working really good. I was happy with it. Think about the only thing I played with, I tried 3 different stall speed torque converters. However, I was very tempted for quite a bit to try the 722 that came with this motor, mainly for this diesel torque converter and obviously for the 5 speeds in it more than anything. I really can't say which of the transmissions I prefer. The Chevy one had a 0.7 was a 0.7 gear ratio. This 722 is 0.83, I believe. So originally my rear end was 373. With the new transmission, I had to re-gear it, and I have 342 rear end right now. Just to give you an idea, 80 miles per hour. I'm currently turning 2,500 RPM, where with the Chevy one, I was around 2,300. Of course, I had to get a different TCU for the 722. I decided to try this one from OF Gear. It was a little over 800 chipped. It's fairly easy to install. It needs RPM, boost, and TPS signal that I get from the standalone ECU. And obviously it also needs a speed signal. Well, the vendor highly recommends an external speed sensor. I don't have one yet. The TCU is capable of using the internal sensors in the transmission. But when you do it that way, I believe it takes a little more effort fine-tuning the TCU. Initial setup is very straightforward, and you get a lot of fine-tuning options depending on your preferences. One thing, however, the TCU is supposed to produce a speed signal, but I have not been able to figure out how to make mine work. Instead, I've been relying on the ECU and ABS sensor signal, but even that's still not working properly. You know, I wouldn't mind switching back or using again the 4L60E, especially since I still have the adapter kit, the TCU, and the transmission itself. On this truck, you know, if I only didn't have to re-gear back to the 373 gear ratio I had before, I would also get my speedometer to work again. The torque converters, I didn't notice any difference, to be honest. And using the Chevy transmission for a little over 2 years, I never had any issues with it. If only the 722 didn't go through the gears so quickly, or at least I wish it didn't. Let me get a quick glimpse of the truck moving. It'd be nice to show you how it shifts and how quickly it makes boost. I don't really have a good way, but let me give it a try. Let me give you some idea how quick this thing can make boost. Here's shifting. You know, it just doesn't get any easier trying to make these videos. I get a lot of brain farts in trying to explain things and focusing on the camera. Especially driving, I wasn't able to get good footage of the transmission shifting. But I showed the computer screen that I showed, the idea is to show the turbo making boost. As you can see, it immediately redlines because I'm using that boost sensor that I believe is only good for 25 PSI. However, the turbo, I'm pretty sure, makes a little bit over 30. But that was, again, just to show you how quickly it can get to usable boost. Well, that's all I have for this update. Again, I'm very likely the last video since I'm going to be trying to sell the truck. I'm sure I left out a lot of important details. Please go ahead and send me any questions you may have, and I'll be more than glad to answer them. Thank you for watching my video. I will try to share my next project.